Good morning, everyone. Today is our awareness session with Hamriyah Safe Zone and Hamriyah regarding the economic substance regulation. Today we'll take you through how do you submit your notifications and reporting. Ms. Verona, you can have the mic. We cannot hear you, Verona.
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now we can hear you.
All right. Sorry about that. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. Thank you, Manal, for the introduction. So I'm joined with my colleague, Nishi, we will both be joint presenting these slides to provide you some awareness and also to do a quick recap of, Economic Substance 101 of, what economic substance is and how does it apply to you and what will you need to submit and how to submit, which will cover then both the notifications and the forms at the end of the session. So we'll just quickly go through the agenda. Yeah. So just to quickly go through for you to know what to expect of this session, we'll quickly give you a brief of what economic substance is, because we might have some new joiners in the webinar today. Who does ESR apply to? Relevant activities. What are the tests for ESR? And section 5 to 7 will be what to submit, all the reporting requirements of licensees. And then lastly, we'll cover penalties for non-compliance. So what is economic substance? Effectively, economic substance was introduced by the OECD by setting guidelines to combat tax avoidance through tax-based erosion and profit shifting. So ESR was introduced by the MOF in UAE in April 2019, pursuant to this initiative by OECD. The law subsequently changed in August 2020. Effectively, this new legislation was introduced and applies retrospectively. As a result, they have replaced the old legislations of 30th April 2019. And therefore, all companies who have previously submitted notifications will need to assess their positions again based on the new legislation that was issued in August 2020. All legislations, old or new, always applied from financial years commencing from 1 January 2019. So this is a retrospective application, and it will apply to all financial years commencing from that date. So who does ESR apply to? It applies to every licensee carrying out a relevant activity. We'll cover what relevant activities are in later slides. Deriving income from that relevant activity in UAE. This can be a free zone entity, a free zone company, could also be a branch of a foreign company. They have defined licensee as a juridical person, effectively a corporate legal entity with separate legal personalities from its owners, or unincorporated partnerships carrying out relevant activities in UAE. This includes free zones or financial free zones. I know a common question comes up is, I'm in a free zone, does this apply to me? Answer is yes, you will need to assess whether or not you carry out a relevant activity, earn income, or whether you carry out a relevant activity and earn income from that activity. Natural person, so if you are an individual, bear in mind, an individual shareholder of an FZC, the FZC will still come under the umbrella of a juridical person. But if you're a natural person carrying out business in your own capacity, ESR will not apply to you because you're not a juridical person. Companies that do not conduct a relevant activity is considered as outside the scope. But before you can consider yourself as outside the scope, you will first need to assess whether or not you perform a relevant activity. No exemptions on specific type of licenses. So another common question we always receive is, I have this license with my authority, am I exempted? Economic substance does not, it's not mandate, well, it doesn't cover, the scope is not covered by licenses. You will need to assess your actual activity, so it becomes a substance over form approach. So you will need to review the definitions of relevant activities to determine whether any exemptions may apply or whether you perform any relevant activities. So now we'll cover exemptions very quickly. So exemptions are basically exemptions given by the government for people who perform a relevant activity but can avail exemptions. If you did not perform a relevant activity, you're already outside the scope and you do not need to avail exemptions. So there are 4 categories of exemptions. The first are licensees who are a tax resident outside UAE. What we mean by a tax resident is, if you're familiar with corporate tax terms, I know we don't have corporate tax in the UAE, but effectively you could have potentially created a permanent establishment outside UAE and therefore have created a tax residence outside UAE. So if you have that kind of tax residence outside UAE and perform a relevant activity, you can claim exemptions from ESR. The next category is investment funds and its investment holding entities. So these are effectively investment funds by the most traditional definition. You need to be an investment fund in itself or the investment holding entities of those funds. The third exemption category are wholly owned businesses of UAE residents, which are not part of a multinational group and only carries on business in the UAE. These are effectively companies which are standalone companies in the UAE, or effectively a group of companies that only function within the country. If you perform any of the relevant activities, you can then claim an exemption on this basis. The fourth criteria is a branch of a foreign company whose income is subject to tax in a foreign jurisdiction. So this is very similar to the first exemption criteria that I've ran through. The branch of a foreign company whose income is taxed in a foreign jurisdiction, in more cases than not, it will be your parent company who you're a branch of, consolidating your income and paying tax in their respective jurisdiction. If this happens, you will need to provide documentation to evidence this in order to claim the exemption. Therefore, any income that you earn out of your relevant activities will therefore be exempted from the ESR test. For all these exemptions, if you were to avail them, you will need to provide supporting documents to the authorities to validate your claim. If you do not have supporting documents to validate your claim, exemptions will not apply. Previously, we just wanted to highlight these 4 new exemptions was also introduced in the August 2020 revision of the ESR legislations. The previous exemption stated that licensees who are directly or indirectly owned by the UAE government of more than 51% were exempted. That scope of exemption was completely removed. So if you were previously considering that as your exemption, you will need to consider whether one of these 4 applies to you or not. If not, exemptions will no longer apply. So now we come to relevant activities. If you recall, when I was covering on who does ESR apply to, it boils back down to whether you perform these relevant activities during your financial year. Considering the activities of licensees of SafeZone and Hamriyah, you will likely, the most common relevant activities potentially are headquarters, holding company, and distribution and service centers. We have covered these activities quite extensively in the previous sessions. The recordings are available on the websites of the authorities, but I'll quickly run through the definitions in order to give you some context of what we consider relevant activities. So for headquarters business, is effectively any management services, senior management services that are provided to your wider group of companies outside UAE. So one of the key criteria of a headquarter business is that you need to be part of a multinational group and providing services to your foreign connected parties. Holding companies are, the good thing about holding companies is that you have limited substance tests. However, there is a limited definition to holding companies because I understand that a lot of companies will be holding equity interest of some sort across their groups. However, in order to qualify as a holding company, you will need to consider whether or not you only perform the activity of holding equity interest and earning income from this equity interest alone. If you perform any other activity, whether or not those activities are a relevant activity or another commercial activity, you are no longer considered a holding company. So it's a very limited definition, which also means that you have a very limited substance requirements. So before you indicate holding company within your form, please review the requirements, because if you're ticking holding company and distribution and service center, that will be an incorrect return. Holding company can only exist by itself. The next relevant activity is distribution and service center. By far, this will be the most common relevant activity that will apply to licensees of both Safe Zone and Hamriyah Free Zone. So for distribution business, I'm separating distribution and service center. The reason why is they have separate definitions. So covering distribution business is effectively any purchase made from foreign connected persons. The previous definition before the amended legislation, if you were present in our previous ESR webinars, the old legislation required the import and export of goods together with the purchase of these goods from foreign connected persons. This definition has been revised, and the new definition is simply any purchase made from a foreign connected person. So if this is part of your business transactions during the financial year, you will be considered as performing a distribution business for ESR purposes. So effectively, they have widened the net, and you will need to reassess whether or not distribution business will apply to you, especially if you're in the trading business. The next definition is service center business. For service center business, it's effectively any services provided to a foreign connected person. There was a slight change in the definition upon the introduction of the new legislation in August. The slight change was effectively the removal of in connection to a business outside UAE. So now any services that was provided to a foreign connected person within your group of companies, that will now come under service center business. And within distribution and service center, that was the main critical changes that was introduced with the new legislation. So it's very important for licensees to revisit their assessment of relevant activities and consider whether it will now apply to them considering the changes. I know that most of you would have submitted the notifications back in June, but we require the resubmissions of those notifications because of these changes. We need our licensees, both Safe Zone and Hafza, to reconsider whether these relevant activities will apply to them in connection to these changes. If there's no changes, please resubmit those notifications accordingly. So just to recap, there are 9 relevant activities. The most relevant activities, most common relevant activities, I would say that is relevant to your zones, will be headquarters, holding company, and distribution and service, which I have covered. However, we will need you to also review the other considerations, the other relevant activities: banking, lease, finance, insurance, fund management, shipping, and intellectual property. If any of these apply, please notify and submit the relevant reports as required. There was a change in the relevant activities considering the introduction of the new legislation in August. This is particularly with distribution and service, which I've covered in depth. We will need you to revisit and reconsider whether or not this will now apply to the company with regards to the relevant activities. A lot of companies have came to us and asked us in previous sessions whether drop shipments will come under distribution. Previously, it did not. But now if the purchase is made by a foreign connected person, it now is under a distribution business. Therefore, a reassessment is definitely required if you're within this umbrella. The third point that I need to reiterate, I know I've said it before, substance over form. Even if the activity is not listed in your trade license, but if you perform those activities, you're still required to report it under economic substance. You need to look beyond what's written within your trade license and the actual activities that was performed during the financial year. If you need detailed guidance on these relevant activities, we have also performed a session, a webinar, I believe, in September or August. This is available on both Hamriyah's and SafeZone's website, and we have discussed this in greater detail. Or you can refer to the MOF website for detailed guidance on these matters. So the next topic that we would like to cover before we reach reporting is the test. These tests are required for companies performing relevant activities, whether one or more, and also that any exemptions will not apply. If you perform a relevant activity and you can claim an exemption, this test will not apply to you. Just to recap again, this test only applies to companies that perform relevant activities and earn an income from these relevant activities, and exemptions do not apply to them. So there are three tests that are required to be met under ESR. The first is that the core income generating activities of those activities that of the relevant activity indicated must be carried out in the UAE. An example of a core income generating activity is, for example, a distribution business. You are purchasing goods from a foreign connected party and subsequently trading with these goods. A core income generating activity could be as simple as taking orders, maintaining the inventory in UAE, and managing the logistics of these inventories that you are purchasing and subsequently trading. So we are looking at the core activities that are generating income as a result of those relevant activities, and that needs to be carried out in the UAE. The law does allow the option of outsourcing, but the catch of outsourcing is that you need to demonstrate control of your outsourced service provider, and your outsourced service provider should be in the UAE and have sufficient assets, employees, and expenditure in the UAE to carry out that income generating activity for you. The second test is directed and managed. Directed and managed, effectively, we are talking about your board of directors. The board of directors are now required to perform at least one board meeting in the UAE that are physically attended by the quorum of directors as per your Articles of Association. Previously, based on what's written in your articles, you may not require a physical meeting in the UAE. But if you happen to perform a relevant activity and earn income from it, that requirement is now extended from an ESR perspective. So even if it's not required within your articles, if you are required to meet the ESR test, you will need to ensure that your board of directors, at least the quorum required, are present in UAE to direct and manage the company. So they will need to attend at least one meeting or more, depending on the requirements of your business. And in that meeting, they need to discuss the strategic decisions of that relevant activity identified. All records and minutes needs to be kept in the UAE. The third test is effectively demonstrating that you have adequate resources for that relevant activity. Employees, physical assets, and expenditure. So whichever relevant activity that is identified, you need to demonstrate to the authorities that you have adequate employees, assets, and expenditure to perform the activity in the UAE. All of this will need to be reported within the report that we'll cover at a later stage. However, it's important to emphasize that adequate is not defined within the legislation. Each business will have a different definition or a different interpretation of what's adequate, and that's all right, so long as you can justify it to the authorities that this is adequate for your business due to historical records, like this has been performed this way for X number of years. We don't need any more staff or any more assets or expenditure to perform activity. That's fine, because no one business is the same and the law recognizes that. So it's back to the company to demonstrate what is adequate for them. There has been no significant changes introduced in the ESR law with regards to this test. So this test has been the same even with the introduction of the new legislation in August 2020. It has remained the same since the introduction of the first legislation in April 2019. One thing to clarify, that under the new law, it was clarified that director and managed doesn't require board members to hold a UAE resident visa. They are just required to physically attend those meetings in UAE to take strategic decisions. We have covered substantially, I think, all these topics, the test, the relevant activities, and the background of ESR in our previous webinars. You can refer to the link there for Hafsa, and I believe SafeZone has also made it available within their website, our previous webinars. So if you will need a recap of these topics, please go back to those webinars to have a listen of the relevant activities definition, the test, and the background of ESR and who it will apply to. So now that we have covered the basics of ESR, now we move on to the new topics, considering that MOF has now launched the portal and how we actually are going to work with those forms when you need to submit those forms. So the first part that we want to cover is what you need to file. We'll first touch on ESR notifications. ESR notifications are required to be filed on a yearly basis within 6 months of your financial year end. So for ESR purposes, we are looking at your financial year end. If you do not have a financial year end, we are looking at the expiry of your trade license. That becomes your anniversary of to consider ESR. You have to file the ESR notification within 6 months of each financial year. For 2020, it's a bit different because they have the portal was only introduced in December. So all companies with a financial year end from 31st December, or not even from 31st December, any financial year ends ending before 30th June 2020 would need to file the ESR notification by 31st December 2020 on the portal. Who needs to submit the notifications are investors carrying out relevant activities and earning income, investors undertaking relevant activities but do not earn income, and anyone who are claiming exemptions. But I need to clarify this. The 3 requirements stated there is as per the legislation, but for administrative purposes, both Hamriyah Free Zone and Safe Zone are requiring all licensees, whether or not you perform a relevant activity, to submit a notification. So even if you do not perform a relevant activity, both authorities will require their licensees to go to the MOF portal, log in or create a login, and submit a notification whether or not you perform a relevant activity. If you do not perform a relevant activity, there is a box for you to indicate that you did not perform a relevant activity for that year. But they will still require you to go and submit that form. This will also apply even if you've submitted the form in 30th June. I know there are a lot of questions coming in because I understand that all of you have also submitted those forms in 30th June. However, because of the law change in August 2020, they will require all licensees to reassess their position because there were new exemptions introduced and there was a change in the definition of relevant activities, particularly with distribution and service center, which is the most common relevant activity that will apply to Hamriyah Free Zones and Safe Zone licensees. So please, everyone, submit your notifications on the MOF portal, whether or not you perform a relevant activity, if your financial year ends before 30th June 2020. if your your first relevant financial year ends after 30th June 2020, you have 6 months from that financial year to submit the notification. And both Hamriyah and SafeZone will require you to submit that notification whether or not you perform a relevant activity. So for example, if you have a year end ending 31st July 2020, you will have until 31st January 2021 to submit your notification. But whether or not you perform a relevant activity, the authorities are requesting that you submit that notification by that deadline. I hope that's clear. The next point that I want to address is the next submission that is required, which is an ESR report. And this is required to be filed 12 months from the end of your financial year. So to be very clear, these are two separate reports that will need to be submitted on the portal. Notifications needs to be submitted irregardless of whether you perform a relevant activity as instructed by both Hamriyah Free Zone and Safe Zone. For ESR reports, you only need to submit the report if you are carrying out a relevant activity and you are earning income from that activity and that you're not exempted. So there will be a limited amount of people we will expect that will be required to submit the reports. However, all licensees will need to submit the notification. So for the group of licensees that are required to file the ESR report by 31st December are those with financial year ends of 31st December 2019. If you have a year ending in March 2020, your first report will be due 31st March 2021. So I hope that is very clear to ensure that you get your filings on time and what you will need to submit. Both of these notification and reports are found on the MOF portal. There is nothing to be downloaded and filled manually or filled on a PDF and sent back to the authorities. Everything is done on the portal in itself. You will need an MOF login. If you don't have that login, you create a login. If you have a login for another group company, you can still use the same login provided that it's the same email address that you want to use to submit multiple notifications or ESR reports. But bear in mind, you can only submit one at a time. The portal works by saving one notification or report up to the point of submission. So in order to submit multiple notifications or reports on one login, you will need to submit one at a go. Otherwise, you create separate logins with different email addresses with MOF, and you can use those to submit different notifications. It's not mandated you need to use one login, nor is it mandated that you need to use separate logins. But notifications and reports are required to be filed irregardless of how you want to manage your MOF logins. This is all on MOF's website. It will no longer be on Hamriyah Free Zone's portal or Safe Zone's portal. So this is just a recap of the deadlines to ensure that everyone gets it right, because it's very important. A late submission of your notification and reports will result in penalties. The first is for businesses having financial year ending prior to 31st December 2019. If you see from this diagram, your notification and your reports are both due by 31st December this year. If your business have a financial year ending between January 2020 to June 2020, your notification needs to come in by 31st December 2020. However, you have a bit more leeway in your ESR report, which will be 12 months from the end of your financial year. So depending where your financial year ends, you get 12 months to submit your report. So you have a bit more time to finish up the report compared to businesses with a year ending before 31st December 2019. And for any other financial years ending after 30th June 2020, ESR notification is due 6 months from the end of the financial year. ESR report is 12 months after. A recap again, ESR report is only if you have a relevant activity and income and are not exempt. Notifications are very important because it needs to arrive by those dates, irregardless whether you do a relevant activity. And that is a mandate by Hamriyah Free Zone and Safe Zone. So now that we have covered deadlines and all the requirements regarding the two reports, we will now take you through the reports in itself. We are also showing you the links of where to go in order to get these reports and notifications submitted. So the first step, you have to go to the MOF website. We have provided a website there. You can either write it down or frankly, you can Google MOF ESR. The first link will be to this web page. You scroll down in that web page, you will find Economic Substance Filing Portal. You click through it and it will drop you to their login page. Here. So if you see this login page, you have two options. If you already have an MOF login, due to whatever reason, previously it might not even be a login created for ESR, you can use that login. You just insert your username and password and you go in. If you do not have a MOF login, you create an account. And the creation of account is fairly simple. They'll show it to you in the next page. If you will see, it's fairly straightforward. You have a username, password, mobile number, type, phone numbers. It's important that you have a phone number because they will send verifications to it as well. You will also need the email ID because without an email ID, they will not send, you will not be able to activate this portal. It must be an email ID that you have access to, because the moment you create an account through this portal, a verification email comes through. If you do not have that verification email and you don't verify it, you will never be able to submit either your notification or your report. And all notification from the authorities on the notifications and reports submitted will go through this email. Mobile number is also very important because you get alerts. So this needs to be held by someone who is always on hand to review anything that comes through from the authorities. So once you create this account and you log in, we will go through the two forms with you. We'll show you where to find them. Okay, so once you log in the account or create an account and have logged in and verified the account, they will land you on this licensee dashboard. So the first thing that you need to submit is the notification. Without submitting the notification, you will never be able to submit the report. Notification needs to come first. So you will see a button to send notification. And once you click through, you will land on this page. Most of this information will be available on your trade license. If you see, it's your name, your account number, etc. There is one, so if you look at question 2, they are asking you a question if you have a dual license. I understand that it's common practice in both authorities that you potentially have a commercial license and a trade license. If these are of the same company, you have to say, yes, you have a dual license and provide license details of both licenses that you have. If you happen to have 3 licenses, you provide those details accordingly. So you will only need to submit one notification even if you hold multiple licenses for the same company. The other things is your license number. Licensing authority is straightforward. Main regulatory authority is also straightforward. It's as per your trade license. Place of establishment will be as per your trade license as well. It should just be mainland or the free zone, which you just indicate that you're a free zone. Registered office address, city, and office country is again straightforward as per your licenses. If you indicate any other address other than your license, you will be prompted by the authority to make the changes to your registered addresses. Legal form we will need to clarify because I know in your trade licenses, you will see free zone entity FZEs or free zone companies FZC. Both, they are not available word for word within this drop down of legal form, but you will need to select limited liability company because both FZEs and FZCs are a form of a limited liability company. So please don't click others and write in free zone entity or free zone company. Click limited liability company if you're either FZE or FZC. If you're a branch of a foreign company, it's already available within the dropdown. And the last question is whether or not you're registered for VAT in UAE. If you are, you will need to provide your VAT registration details. So now moving on to exemptions. With regards to exemptions, you will also need to indicate if this applies to you or not. You will need to tick which exemptions will apply to you. And once you tick the exemption that applies to you, an option will appear for you to indicate what the supporting documents that you're going to include to substantiate your claim. So it just isn't a tick box exercise. Ticking exemption doesn't automatically mean that you can get the exemption. You will need to substantiate it with supporting documents and upload the same on the website. Before this, between the basic details and the exemptions, there are a few other things that you will need to complete. We didn't snapshot it here. The reason why is because they're quite straightforward. But I want to highlight that for branch details, in the event if you have branches in any other jurisdiction and you're the main company in UAE and you have branches in the mainland or other free zones, you will need to indicate those branch details within your reporting if they perform a relevant activity. If Hamriyah free zone and safe zone licenses are a branch of other companies in the mainland or any other free zone, your submission goes through the main company's notification and report. You don't submit a separate notification for branches of local companies. But if you're a branch of a foreign company, you proceed as though you're any other company in Hamriyah free zone and safe zone. Reportable period, I also didn't touch upon, simply because we have touched upon this earlier as well. It's indicating your financial years commencing from 1 January 2019 onwards. So you follow your financial year. Failing which, if you do not have a financial year, we are looking at the expiry of your trade license. But please first check if your company has a financial year or not. Yes. So we have highlighted the exemptions criteria. I'll go through them relatively quickly, but because we have already covered them up top. But effectively, you will need to indicate which of these exemptions you're applying. 1B and 1C are similar but different, but they are covered under the same exemption criteria, I will say. But you will need to identify which of it applies. Either your investment fund, or you're a special purpose vehicle or investment holding company of an investment fund. Other than that, 1A, 1D, and 1E, you will see are quite straightforward in their interpretations and definitions. If you need them again, please submit your supporting documents with it, because the authorities will need those supporting documents to accept your claim of exemption. This will all be checked. Any exemption claims will be checked by the authorities. Therefore, the supporting documents are very, very important. So once you have populated that, in the event if you have identified exemptions, you need to indicate your group structure as well. But if there is no exemptions, it's straightforward. You just end up at the declaration page. It's also important that within your declaration, it's signed off by the authorized person in your company. So that is usually the manager on your trade license, or if you have any other person that has a power of attorney signed off by either the directors or that manager himself to pass on the powers to represent the company. Please indicate the person's name here. This person will be responsible for all declarations made both in the notifications and the report. So it should not be someone, say a receptionist or an administrative clerk signing this off. This needs to be a person of authority to make this declaration on behalf of the companies. So that's the completion of the notification. My colleague Nishi will be covering the next part, which will be the ESR report.
Thanks, Verona. So as we mentioned earlier that only once you make the submission of your notification, then the feature to submit the ESR report will get populated. So as you can see, this would be your dashboard. And once you have filled in your notification, there would be a tab which says File ESR Report. So the moment you click on it, it will land you to the ESR report form, online form on the portal. Yeah, so again, starting with the general information, as we discussed during the notification stage, a lot of these information would be pre-populated and will be automatically picked up from whatever you entered while submitting your ESR notification. Now, the only details relating to the office or the premise and your VAT related information is something that you would need to fill it in here within the report. Rest all the information will be automatically picked up from the from what you filled up during your notification filing. Now, there's also this thing that if there is any kind of difference in whatever you had entered while submitting your ESR notification, then you need to indicate that updated information under section D, which is for updated information. That comes up right after your when you declare what's your reportable period. So it's a repetition of whatever you would have filed it up during your notification. So we'll just move on to financial information section. So in this one, you have to indicate whether you have the audited financial statements available with you. So this audited financial statement can be on a standalone basis, or it can also be the consolidated financial statement, which is with the parent entity. The other one is in terms of declaring the currency that has been used for declaring your financial information. It can be either in AED or USD. If there is any other currency that has been used, then you have to use the convertible value in either of these two currencies. Now, the total revenue that you have to declare is as per your books, whatever you have recorded in your books. It would be your gross income, which is there in either your standalone financial statement or your consolidated financial statement. Now, when we talk about your accounting profit, this is again as per your books, how it has been recorded as under the applicable accounting standards. Now, these tangible assets again is how it is recorded in your books, and it would be the net of your depreciation and your any impairment losses. So these are very generic information as you would find it in your accounting records. So in between these sections, there were other very generic piece of information. So right after your financial information, you have to declare which relevant activity is being executed by the company. That's under section F. Now we have a lot of the relevant activities, total 9 in number. But for the purpose of this webinar, we have only kept distribution and service center business to use as an example to go through each of these sections in detail. So depending on whichever relevant activity you are selecting, these questions will come up as per those relevant activities. So for the distribution and service center business, you will see that there is a bifurcation within this section. That is, first one is your distribution business, and then you will see that there is another section which is for service center. So for distribution, again, the first question is around your relevant income. So whatever is the cost of the goods that you have acquired and then sold, whatever you've recorded that in your books, that needs to be disclosed over here. Same way for your operating expenditure, whatever was the associated cost in acquiring those goods and then selling it off is what you need to record it over here, whichever you have covered within your financial records. The cost of the goods, as I mentioned earlier, would be the cost that the direct cost of acquiring those goods from your foreign related parties that you would be selling it onwards. That needs to be covered over here. Now, average number of full-time equivalent employees in the UAE in relation to distribution business for the reportable period. So this is nothing but to disclose the number of employees that you have who are involved in execution of distribution business activity. So these employees can be either directly employed by you, or it can be employed by a related party or a third party. So how you have to assess whether they are full-time employee or not is by referencing it against the standard working week of 40 hours during your reportable period. And of course, if the employees are are working on a part-time basis, then you have to consider only a fraction of those working hours. Now, one important thing that I want to highlight over here is that if there is a scenario where the director is also an employee of the company for executing the activity, so in that case, you will need to consider that director also while assessing the average number of full-time employee. So that means the director is performing the SIGA, and in addition to that is also conducting his role of being a director, that is in taking strategic decisions. So you don't have to exclude the director, but also include it in arriving at this average number of full-time employee. The next question is about the core income generating activities performed in UAE in relation to distribution business for the reportable period. So you can see that different conditions under the SIGA of distribution business has already been provided. So you will need to tick it off whichever is applicable to you. So the first one is transporting and storing component parts, materials, or goods ready for sale. Next one is managing inventories, then taking orders, then others. If there is anything else that you want to mention, the moment you click on it, there would be a comment box that will come up where you can further elaborate on what all you want to cover over here. Now, there's another section which says that if no core income generating activities are performed in the UAE, then you have to explain it to them. So again, the moment you click on it, you will get that space where you have to provide some information around this. And if at all you do not find this comment, then we have a section after your declaration where they allow you to submit additional information. So you can make use of that space to upload any additional documents which you want to cover relating to anything that you're declaring here in the ESR report. So moving on from SIGA, then you have to disclose the expenditure that you're incurring in outsourcing this activity, the distribution business itself. So if whatever cost that you're incurring in outsourcing that to a third party or a related party, you have to disclose that over here. Again, accounting profit or loss that is attributable to the distribution business as you're recording it in your books, you have to disclose that over here. Next section is about industry. So you have to select that specific segment of industry where you're executing your distribution business. Then they are asking, does the licensee take legal title to the goods purchased from foreign connected person? So this will be considered, of course, if the licensee has a legal ownership in the goods when buying it from the foreign related party, and this is until the time it is sold onwards, until the title is transferred to the customer. So basically, you assume all the risk associated with the inventories as well till the time it is passed on to the customer. Now, does the licensee maintain inventory in the UAE? So, of course, as part of one of the conditions in the SIGA of distribution business, you have to mention whether the inventory is being maintained in UAE or not, which means that it needs to be physically present in the UAE when it is imported from outside of UAE from your foreign related party and is kept in the UAE until it is sold onwards. So you have to disclose all of this information the moment you click distribution business. Yeah, now we move on to the next segment of this relevant activity, which is service center. So a lot of these questions are very much similar to what we discussed for distribution. So relevant income from service business for the reportable period, or operating expenditure incurred in relation to the service business. These information will be as per your records. You have to disclose them over here. Again, the average number of full-time employee equivalent employees you have to disclose based on the standard working hours of standard working weeks of 40 hours during your reportable period. You have to disclose that. And of course, you have to consider director as well if he is also involved in executing the relevant activity. With respect to SIGA for service business, you have to see that they have mentioned these points very specifically. You have to tick them off. One is providing consulting or other administrative services. If you're selecting other, then of course you will get another space the moment you tick on it to specify what is that you're considering under other. And if there is no SIGA being performed, then you have to explain the reason for it. Again, the space would open up, and if it doesn't, then you can utilize that additional information section in the end to upload any extra set of information that you would want to share with the authorities. Expenditure incurred on outsourcing providers in the UAE in relation to service business. So whatever is the cost that is being incurred in outsourcing the service center business to a third party or a related party. So you have to cover that cost, that expenditure as per your books over here. Again, accounting profit or loss attributable to the service center. Again, the same thing, you have to record it as per your books. Type of services provided by the licensees, you have to specify exactly the nature of the service that is being provided. So whether it is consulting, administrative service, if it is sales and marketing support, so you have to specify that over here. And if you're providing these services to a third party, then also you have to mention that in the form. You have to disclose that. And then last one, you have to disclose the total income that you're earning from service center business when you are providing it to a third party. So once you're done with the information for the relevant activities, then you will come across different tests for which you will need to answer. We have just picked up directed and managed test over here. So it would ask you those specific questions, and also you will have to upload some documents to substantiate this. So for instance, in the test which concerns the directed and management of activity in the UAE. So for that, you have to disclose the number of the frequency for the board meetings that were held during the reportable period, and how many of those meetings took place in UAE during the reportable period. Then you have to also mention whether the quorum of those directors were actually physically present in the UAE for those board meetings. So as we had earlier mentioned, for taking even if the directors are not resident in the UAE, they are expected to be physically present in the UAE while taking the board meetings and taking the strategic decisions for the relevant activity. So you have to specify that under this section. Then the next question following up to that is, were all strategic decisions made during the board meetings held in the UAE? So of course, a key indicator to prove that would be in the form of written records, the board minutes. So all of that you have to specify over here, and of course the authority is going to ask you for submission of those relevant records to prove that the meeting did take place in UAE and adequate quorum was present over here. And of course there were strategic decisions taken up for the relevant activity. So the key indicator would be these records, minutes of the meetings that are officially signed off by the attendees. So that brings us to the next question, which is for are the board minutes and company records maintained in the UAE? So if yes, you have to mention that. Does the board of directors have necessary knowledge and expertise to discharge their duties? Now, this is very important because just like how we discussed that the authority has not provided a specific number or a yardstick to consider what is adequate or sufficient. Similarly, they've not elaborate on what is considered by them as the necessary knowledge or expertise, but it's as per the general expectation in whichever industry the licensee is in, and whichever relevant activity that they are executing in UAE. Then in relation to that, the director should have the necessary skill set and capabilities to take those decisions, which means to say it shouldn't happen that whatever decisions were taken overseas, let's say at the head office level, then it's just being executed over here in UAE by way of form instruction. So it shouldn't happen that way outright. There should be some involvement and participation of the directors as well in taking those decisions. So moving on from directed and managed, we come down to the last part of declaration. So again, declaration is exactly same as notification, that you have to specify the details of the person who is there as a general manager or a director and who's assuming the responsibility of the company for any kind of communications. And of course, the phone number and email IDs are extremely important because that's how the authorities are going to coordinate with you for asking more information or if there is any documents that they need from you. So it's very important that you provide these details correctly. And as you progress till the end, you will realize that there are a lot of declarations in terms of the adequacy in terms of whether you have qualified employees to execute the relevant activities, whether you have adequate expenditure and physical assets in relation to your relevant activities. So you have to declare that formally in this report. Now, of course, because as we had mentioned earlier, that holding company business would be subject to a reduced test. This is one of them. This is not going to be applicable for the holding company business. If you're selecting that, this confirmation would automatically basically disappear from your final submission. The next is about that it's a confirmation on whether the licensee has complied with all the requirements to submit any documents, records, or information required under applicable laws in the UAE, and if it has adequate number of employees and physical premises in the UAE to undertake its holding company business. Now, these are the reduced tests which have been put over here in the report the moment you click on holding company business. So for the purpose of giving you a complete understanding of what may come and what won't, it further reflects to the fact that it is subject to the relevant activity that you are clicking on. So if you're clicking on holding company business, you will not get a question around your adequacy of employees, expenditure of physical assets, but you will get the next section, which would be a consolidated one for just to say that yes, you are complying with all the requirements. and you have the adequate number of employees' physical premises in the UAE to undertake the holding company business. Now that brings us to the next section, which is for declaration. So in the declaration, you have to upload your financial statements. You have to upload any additional document that you would wish to highlight to the authorities, or if there is any explanation that you want to provide, if there is any other additional letter or management account, anything that you want to upload, you can use this particular section to do so, and also provide within this next box, which is your 6th number, to say what are these additional information that you wish to highlight. And then the last one would be that you're confirming that all the information that you've provided is complete and accurate, and acknowledge that all the sections have been completed to the best of your knowledge. And that's about it. That's how you move on to the final submission stage. Now, this brings us to the another important point, which is for the penalties for non-compliance. So as we already saw the timelines that are there for the companies having their financial year end by 31st of December of 2019, they have the obligation to submit both notification and ESR report by end of this month. So failure to do so would lead to the administrative penalties. So if you have failed to submit the ESR notification, the penalty would be 20,000 dirhams. If you fail to submit your ESR report, then there would be an administrative penalty of 50,000 dirham, and it would be deemed that you have failed to demonstrate economic substance in UAE. Then, of course, you would have seen that we have highly emphasized on the point that you have to be very clear on the information that you're providing, and the documentation that you are going to upload in the report. So if there is anything which is inaccurate or incomplete, then for that there is an administrative penalty of 50,000, and of course there would be a deeming provision involved that you have failed to demonstrate economic substance in the UAE. Now, upon when we move on to the fact that is being covered within the report, and while going through it, if it appears to the authority that you have failed to meet the economic substance in the UAE for that relevant financial year, then for the first year, the penalty would be 50,000, and your information would be sent for exchange by the ministry over here to the competent authorities overseas, wherever you're operating for, wherever the parent company is present, or the ultimate parent company is present, or the UBO is present. So that information exchange would be done upon your first year of non-compliance. If you continue to fail to meet the ESR test even in the second consecutive year, then this would further escalate. Again, the information exchange with foreign competent authorities would be done, and this penalty would aggravate from 50,000 dirham to 400,000 dirham, and this can also lead to the risk of getting your license revoked. So this is something which is which is quite an important information for you to keep in mind, and ensure that whatever you're disclosing, first of all, meet all the timelines that have been prescribed for submission of your notification and report. Then you ensure that whatever you are submitting is absolutely correct, and you have all the valid records and documents to prove your claim. And if there is any kind of discrepancy here and there, and if the authority asks from you for additional information, then you have to make all the best efforts to ensure that those information is made available to the authority. So that brings us to the end of penalties section, and also to our to this session. The floor is now open for taking up questions.
Yep. Thank you, Nishi. Just to recap before we move into the Q&A, we have about 5 to 10 minutes to take up some questions. To recap, because it's very critical. Please, all licensees, submit your notifications whether or not you perform a relevant activity that's required by both Hamriyah Free Zone and Safe Zone. Please reassess whether or not it applies to you, particularly distribution and service center, because the definitions have changed and potentially, now it's a wider scope, so there'll be more licenses that falls into it. So if you now opening up to Q&A, you can either raise your hand or type a question, and Nishi will select there some relevant questions. We have about 10 minutes for some Q&As.
Yeah. Verona, before we move on to taking up questions, one of the common questions that we have received is what if they made some, what if there was some issue in or some mistake while making a submission? Is there an option to make an amendment? Can they edit that after they have submitted?
Sure. If you have already submitted and at a later date realize that, oh no, something was wrong in that submission, if you go to the MOF portal dashboard, you will see what has been submitted, and there will be a button for request for amendment attached to that form itself. If you need an amendment, you need to request for amendment, state why you need that amendment. The authorities, so either Hamriyah Free Zone or Safe Zone, will open your form for amendment. But you need to wait until the authorities approve the request for amendment, and you cannot amend it until that request has been approved.
Understood. So we have a lot of questions over here. I'll just try to unmute one of. So we have a question from Clarissa Dapal. Hi, Clarissa, can you hear us? You can ask your question. Okay, so we'll just move on to the next question. We have from Jitesh Mohan. Hi, Jitesh. Do you have a question, Jitesh?
I think we need to move on then.
Yeah. So next question we have from Sijin Unnikrishnan. Hi, Sijin. Yes, we...
I think they don't know that they are unmuted.
Sijin, we have unmuted you.
No, if you scroll down, you can see all the...
Mute him and take the next question, please. Because I don't think he knows that he's unmuted.
Yeah. So next question we have from Mr. Muhammad Zabalawi. Sorry. Muhammad, we have put you on an unmute button.
Hi.
So you can now ask your question. Yes.
Hi.
Yes, hi, Mohammed.
Dear, it is just somehow not very clear for me. I have a trading in software and IT products company. We are two directors for the company. One of us is a silent shareholder, and the other one is the real director of the company. We perform business only inside UAE.
So if you're a trading, so if you're a trading company, I'm assuming you're not part of a multinational group.
Absolutely at all.
Yeah. So if you're not part of a multinational group, trading activities is not considered a relevant activity. But you will still need to notify the authorities through the ESR notification that you don't perform a relevant activity for the financial year.
In the portal. So creating an account in the portal, a username and password in the portal, and filing there is a must. Thank you very much.
On the MOF portal, please. Yes, on the MOF portal and not the authorities portal.
Yeah, sure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you.
So we can take up next question from Mr. Oleg Doro. Hi, Oleg.
Hello?
Yes.
Hello.
Do you hear me well? Okay, great.
Yes, we can.
I have a question. Why do you advise to submit a notification if a company does not have a relevant activity? Ministry of Finance says you do not have to file a notification also.
I understand that, and that's as per the UAE legislation. However, the authorities of both Hamriyah Free Zone and Safe Zone are requesting for it to be submitted, for them to ensure that all licensees have considered ESR for their business. So it's
Okay.
yeah, it's not mandatory from an MOF perspective, but the local authorities will that all their licensees submit it so they can check it.
Okay, so will be any penalty if it's not submitted or not, or is just local authority deal with the company or something like this?
So if you do not perform a relevant activity, if you fail to submit the notification, there should not be any penalty. However, if you perform a relevant activity or are claiming an exemption, etc., and fail to submit it, there will be a penalty of 20,000.
I got it. Then the next question. I submitted the notification in June saying that I do not have a relevant activity. It could fall under distribution, but we're a standalone company and we are not part of any multinational group. So I believe in this case, with this new law, we still do not have to, we are not related to any activity because we trade spare parts, and it means and also we are not any in connection in a foreign group. We do not, we don't have a parent company, etc., etc. So we are not related to any related activity. So we don't have to file the ESR.
I will agree with you. If you're not part of a multinational group, you should not be performing a relevant activity since you only trade spare parts. However, because both Hamriyah and Safe Zone have requested their license to submit the notification, I will still advise that you go to the MOF portal and submit it. Even though I know MOF has communicated that no relevant activities means that you don't have to report. So please just submit the notification to the authorities, even if you don't perform a relevant activity.
Okay, and this has to be done every year. The notification also, if something changes or not changes, you still have to do it every year.
That's right. Every year you will need to assess. Notifications are due 6 months from end of financial year, and reports, if applicable, 12 months after end of financial year.
Okay, got it. And one more question. Sorry, I have written it down.
No problem.
Just a second. Okay. Okay, this is it, I think. This is it. Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one more question, Nishi.
Yep. So we have next question from Sharmeen Sadaf.
Yes. Hi, both of you.
Hello.
Hello. I have a question. As we are operating in UAE with very different financial year starting from 1st November 2019. So we will not fall in the 30th June deadline, right?
That's right. If your first relevant financial year is 1st November 2019 to 31st October 2020, your first notification will be due May 2021. And if reports are due, it will be due October 2021.
Yeah, exact after 6 months from the end of financial year.
That's right. Notification is 6 months, and if you need to file a report, it's 12 months after the end.
Yes. And do we need the completed audited financials for the notification filing?
You don't necessarily need audited financial statements for ESR purposes. However, it's recommended because they will rely that to check on the ESR report. But at the point of filing the notification, you don't need to submit any audited financial statements.
Okay.
Thank you so much. Will require you. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.
No problem. I think let's take one last question before we wrap up.
So next question we have from Mr. Zubaria Ijaz. I think I'll just move on from here. We have another question from Dev Kumar Suryam. Again, he has self-muted himself. I'll just move on to the next one.
Sure.
We have another question from Mr. Gopinath Nair. Hello. Yeah, again self-muted. I'll just move on to the next one. We have Mr. Harish Savalia. Hi, Harish.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Us? Yeah.
Yes, we can.
Yeah, actually, I have a doubt in financial information. There is an option of the accounting profit of the licensee a reportable period that I have to mention what profit is mentioned in my books in the audit reports. Now, the second thing, you also mentioned the distribution service and center business. There is also mentioned the profit over there. So I understand that what income I receive from the relevant parties and what purchases purchase from the relevant parties from both of them, differences amount in mentioned over here, right?
Okay, so section E of the financial information, they're just asking for the financial information of your company as a whole. So whatever is in your audited financials or your management accounts, you report it there. When it comes to relevant activities, they're asking for financial information in connection to those activities. So if your company only performs those relevant activities and no other activity which may not be a relevant activity, say for example, a distribution business, assuming you only purchase from a foreign connected person. So that means your entire financial information of your company will be attributable to distribution. So the financial information will effectively be duplicated from section E. But if your company performs a distribution business and also, purchases goods from third parties and also trades on those, so you will need to identify how much income is earned from purchases from foreign connected persons. And you need to identify the income, the corresponding expenditure, and therefore lastly, the profit or loss. The employees will also need to apportion accordingly. If you can't identify, say, expenditure or revenue, you could take a proportion based on the proportion of purchases. So long as it's reasonable in arriving at those figures, it should be acceptable. But keep for internal records on how you derive those figures in relation to relevant activities.
Okay, thank you.
Does that make sense?
Yes.
So yeah.
I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A, or do you want to take a few more questions?
I think that brings us to the end of the Q&A. We have already taken 20 over minutes ahead of time. So we're really sorry for the overrun. We actually wanted to cover some basics to ensure everyone was on the same page, because we understand there has been quite a number of changes since the introduction of ESR. Manal, do you want to say some last words?
No, thank you, everyone. And if you need anything, any question, just drop us an email at our emails. It's known now, everyone. And thank you. Thank you both.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody. Bye.
Bye.